Welcome. Welcome, Lindsay. Welcome to Stolaroid Stories. Finally, a polyglot on my podcast. I've never interviewed a polyglot. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Lindsay, you're the first polyglot that I'm interviewing. You speak over, no, you've self-studied languages for many years, since you were 8, you say.
Mm, mm.
And you speak 14 languages to conversational level or beyond. You speak French, Spanish, Italian, Mandarin, German, Dutch, Portuguese, Japanese, Esperanto, Indonesian, Guarani, which I don't even know what it is, Korean, Bulgarian, and Russian. Can you confirm?
I can slightly, and I would say also in terms of things I've studied, the list is even longer. Um, Turkish is probably replacing some of those weaker ones in terms of conversationalness ish at the
Hmm.
minute. So it's weird because it's always the big question whenever whenever you talk about multiple languages and polyglotism and stuff, it's like, well, how many? And it's such a difficult question to answer.
Hmm.
And so, the way that you said it, like I've studied over 14, probably over 15, I would say now, to a level that I'm happy with and can communicate in. Some of them really pretty good, some of them less so, but still able to get the point across and be understood and everything. So it's like a real spectrum. And so it's always a really difficult thing to answer because the minute that you say a number and like a long list, it sounds like, whoa. And and I like, and then when I kind of step in and say, actually, it's not like I'm trying to be modest or anything. It's just like, just don't want people to get the wrong impression. It's very tricky.
Um, what languages do you speak at a very high level?
I would say, well, obviously, English native is like the default. Then French and Spanish are kind of the sort of top tier. Spanish probably more so than French, a little bit. Then below that would be German, Italian, Portuguese, where it takes less for me to get into that headspace and to be able to speak and understand.
Mhm.
And then below that, it's like I need to kind of go back and revisit stuff, or I need a bit of time to tune in because I just haven't taken other languages, to the same level. Actually, I say that I always kind of end it there, but I would say maybe something like Indonesian and probably actually Guarani is sort of in the third tier down, where they're a little bit stronger than the others.
Hmm. And my question is, how did you do that? Like, how did you learn so many languages? What did you do?
When it gets easier, the
Mm.
more languages that you learn, the easier it gets because it's like I used to think that each language was kind of in its box in my brain. Like there was the French box, and okay, we're speaking French now. Open that and use that. There's the Spanish one, open that and use that. But really, I've learned now it's not how it works. And we often find like if you're learning more than one other language and you think, why did I say the word in Spanish when I'm trying to speak French? Why did that come out? I've obviously not got it strong enough. I've not, divided it enough, but really that's okay. It's normal because what you create instead of these boxes is what I call a linguistic repertoire, right? So
Mm.
everything that you know in any language forms this knowledge of words and of language as a complete whole. And there are sections of that. So there is the Spanish section, but from that Spanish section, there are links to French and links to Italian and even links to things that don't seem as obvious. Like, if I studied Spanish at the same time as, let's say, something that doesn't seem to connect, like Japanese, then there might be a connection that takes me over to there. And so everything becomes connected. And the more that you learn, you then have more of these connections to spot. And so for me, it's always been, I feel that I am never going to like quell this desire to discover more about the world through language. So there's no point in me trying to fight that and focus in really deep with one language, because it just isn't going to work for me. And so knowing multiple languages to lower levels helps me sort of satisfy that itch, if that makes sense. In terms of, so that's the basis of it, is that the more you do, the easier it gets. But how I've done it, the like specifics, I would say it did start with one. So as you say, when I was 8 years old, for me it was French club in primary school. It was this extra thing that got me out of maths, and we had croissants at the end of each, before each holiday. So I was like, yeah, I'm there. Sign me up again, mum. Let's go. And that was enough of a motivation. Then at actual sort of big school, the French was the same as I had done for the past few years. So it was really, really boring for the first couple of years for me, because everyone in the class is like, oh, French sucks. Why do we have to learn French anyway? Everyone speaks English, all of that attitude. And when I would even then try to say to the teacher, oh, how do I say blah, blah, blah? No, stick to what we're doing in the lesson. So it was like really not a very productive environment to go further. But around the same time, I was listening to Shakira's first English album, or mostly English album, Laundry Service. And there were these translations, these versions of the songs in Spanish. So it was like, I want to know what she's saying. That's really cool. How can she do that? I was really impressed by this. And I thought, well, I've learned French. Surely it's the same process. Let's try and learn Spanish. And I got myself a little Spanish gem dictionary for my birthday, and an older Shakira album that was completely in Spanish. And I would sit, this isn't a very I don't recommend this method, but I would sit and try with my gem dictionary to search every single word in the lyrics booklet of the CD. Obviously didn't quite get me to understanding all of the lyrics, but it was the start, right? And it was the passion that then meant when I got to pick options, I wanted to do Spanish, when that suddenly became available to me for exam level. And my school said, if you want to do Spanish, you have to do French to prove that you can do languages. So I was like, okay, whatever. So I'm fine with French. Let's just keep going if it means I get to do Spanish. So from relatively early on, there was this initial kind of build up. But then from age, 13, there's always been multiple languages. It's been the norm for me, which isn't really the norm in the UK, for a lot of, sort of English speakers that are born into monolingual families here. Of course, we have lots of immigration and families that are multilingual, but the expectation is it's English, right? And so, yeah, from there, it literally just, it spiraled and it snowballed, and it just became this thing that, enough times being told you're good at that, so you keep going with it, and then you sort of are finding your love for it along the way. And so it just became part of my life through that, really. And in terms of going beyond sort of academic settings, I was about, I don't know how old I was, but it was 2014 when I moved my business online. Initially, it was private tuition, driving around to people's houses. 2014, I moved online, and I was like, well, I need to be learning something for myself. And I was still studying part-time for my degree in languages. So I was doing French and Spanish at like really high levels at this point. But that was kind of boring to talk about on my blog, on my website. I needed to be a beginner. I needed to put myself in that position again. So I started learning languages kind of a few months at a time, just to see how far I could get, almost like experimental. And that then led to me thinking, okay, yeah, after a few years, which ones do I want to take further? Which ones am I happy to leave where they are? And what do I want to do next? And really just feeling very free to explore through that. So that was a real pivot point as well. And yeah, now it's just, there are languages that I am learning more actively. There are languages that are kind of more sort of, I suppose you could say, maintenance. So something like Italian, where I sort of am fine tuning bits when I have the time, but there's no rush, there's no pressure. And there are sometimes languages that are a little bit more pressured, that do have a bit of a time or a deadline. I just got back last week from Turkey. So before I went, I was like, let's go, let's learn some Turkish, you know? And then obviously I'm going to be there for 2 weeks. That's the deadline. So that then becomes more of an intensive project for that little while before going. And then I can decide when I come back, did I enjoy it? Am I likely to go back? Do I like this language? Is there something to keep me going here a little bit? So it really varies, but it's very, right now that I've finished kind of the academia side of it all, it's very playful, it's very free, and it's just very fun.
Cool. You used an expression before. You said, I exploring the world through language. What do you mean by this?
I see it as a bit of a doorway. So some people might enjoy history, right? And so if they go to travel to a place, if they're choosing what to watch on TV, they're going to pick a history documentary, or they're going to go and visit the historical sites and learn about a place and learn about a people and a culture through history. Some people, it might be food, where they love to explore a new restaurant. It's me. I mean, yeah, I have to put my hand on that one too. Yeah, definitely. You know, they love to explore a new restaurant or find new recipes to try at home. And that's their foot in the door of something new, of discovering a new part of the world that we all share. And for me, it's language that acts as that door, because language and words, there's so much contained within that. You know, words contain history, they contain culture, they contain values and knowledge, that the only way to really understand, for me, for the way that my brain works, is to access through language and to see it through that lens. So I really see it as a lens to kind of, you know, to get a perspective on things.
Yeah, because I don't remember. I think it was David Crystal, a linguist, who said, now I can't remember the quote, but it said something like, language is thinking. So the more you get to learn a language, the more you get to know how that culture thinks, basically.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And David Crystal, what a legend.
Like... Yeah. Yeah, well, you've got a master's degree in applied linguistic, so you must have read something by David Crystal for your
even
assignments.
long before
okay.
I had the David Crystal on the shelf. Yeah.
And how much time did you... I mean, you learned these languages, but to me, if I had to do that, I would think, okay, I need to study all day from morning till the evening. It's a full-time job learning all those languages. So how much time have you been spending on language learning?
Well, it varies. I feel language learning happens in phases, where there are two phases, right? We have phases of speedy gains and we have phases of steady growth. So the majority of language learning is steady growth. It's the repetition, it's the practice, it's the little daily micro habits that all add up to something great. But the minority of that time, where sometimes we gain pretty rapid progress, is the speedy gains. The difficulty with this is that we think it is going to be and needs to be a constant period of speedy gains, which would mean more time, more effort, more energy, just really full on devotion to the whole thing. And we think that that's what it has to look like. Like you said, you know, if you were going to start Turkish tomorrow, you'd think, right, morning to night, we got to go. We got to do this thing. But the reality is that is less sustainable in the long term, because all of a sudden we've had this thing take over our lives. For most of us, that's not going to be something that we can maintain beyond a couple of weeks. or a couple of months at most, right? And so we need to get comfortable with both phases because they're both going to happen. We're going to want and we're going to need, and we are in control of when we choose to go for these speedy gain periods. But equally, we want to make sure that we're as comfortable with the majority of language learning time, which is going to be steady growth. Because that's when, for some people, it can get really uncomfortable because you feel like, oh, I've suddenly slowed down. My progress has gone from to right. And for a lot of people, that's the stopping point where they think, well, maybe I guess that's the end. And it's not. And it really doesn't have to be. And so it is very much about understanding and getting comfortable with both of that and the transition as well between the two. So there are moments, like I mentioned with the Turkish before going away, I knew I had X number of weeks. So I needed, some kind of more concentrated time and effort. So what that looked like was I had a weekly lesson and my priority language was Turkish, which means I have a bit of time in the morning that is like my language time that is sort of sacred and this is the chunk of time where I'm doing the thing
every day.
And then every weekday, I would say, and sometimes on the weekend it happens too, right? But then if there's like moments in the day like where maybe I'm need a break, and so you sort of turn off and you sort of reach for your phone, I'm not one for like scrolling social media. Instead, I'm like, okay, let's do a bit of a language app. And if I don't feel like that, that's fine too, right? So they can happen, but I've already had this chunk at the beginning. And then if things happen in the evening, if there's a bit of extra time, then it's more free flowing. But that little time in the morning was purely Turkish for those few weeks. So Russian, which was my other sort of longer term focused language, was sort of put on the back burner, but I still had a weekly lesson in Russian as well. And then Turkish, I had the weekly lesson and I had the daily contact and study and improvement and stuff like that. So, and that was a relatively, if I'm honest, relaxed speedy gains phase. I could have gone way harder with that and devoted way more time and effort, but I knew that because the reason I went to Turkey was because I was running Istanbul Marathon, so it's not exactly
I was about to ask if you went to Turkey to learn Turkish.
No, I went because I wanted to run an international marathon this year, and Istanbul was the one that came out top just because it was like in November, so it was a great time of year because it was like, okay, I've got loads of time to train. But then that also means if you're training for a marathon in those last few weeks before you begin to taper and then relax and rest, you're running a lot. There's a lot of hours. So I knew that had to be the priority overall. And so I didn't go all in on Turkish as much as I could have. But then on a regular basis, it doesn't look like that at all. There's the time in the morning, which is typically now kind of as I'm coming back into things and I'm feeling like, feeling it out a bit. What do I want now? Where do I want to go? Russian is now the priority, at least temporarily. We'll see what happens. And then I am still interested in Turkish. I found a lot of ties between Arabic, between French, like all these connections. So I'm interested to see where that goes. So it's something that then is the sort of second priority for me after that. So it changes all the time.
And what do you focus your practice on? Because if you are learning, I don't know, Turkish and you're not in Turkey, where are you based, by the way? Are you in England?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't get to speak, well, maybe in England, if you're in London, you can get to speak Turkish, but okay, in general, you don't have a lot of opportunities to practice your speaking, at least, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
what do you do?
So in terms of speaking, that's where I knew that for Turkish in particular, I was going to be in the country and I was going to be speaking was going to be a priority. So that's why I booked the lessons. So I had that weekly chance to actually speak with someone and be checked and, made sure I was saying the right things. In between, when I'm studying on my own, there is a great and underappreciated value in speaking solo, right? And the comparison that I can give is, if we think about, we're going to go and see a musical concert, right? We're going to see the most amazing piano player that you've ever heard. Do you think they're going to just walk up on that stage and play for the first time? No. they are practicing for hours in their room, in private, solo, to make sure that when they are in front of that audience, it's sounding good. And so it's the same thing here. We can't just expect to, do a bit on an app, read a bit in a book, not produce the language, and then rock up in a country and speak perfectly. Mm-hmm. Isn't going to happen. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the practice is speaking solo. So, and not even massively, it's not even a huge investment. It doesn't have to be. So I was, doing activities in my book or doing something on an app or whatever, and then using that to then produce something. Typically with Turkish, because it's a newer language, it would be something written that I would produce, some sentences to practice new vocab, things like that, creating context, and then reading them aloud, speaking them aloud, and just practicing, hearing those sounds, feeling it, right? So that when I then am showing up at my lesson each week, I'm saying, oh, here's what I've done. These are my new sentences. How do they sound? Does this work? And if I look back and I see the face like, oh, then I know I've got some work to do. But if I look back and she's going, oh, yeah, then I'm like, fine, that's good enough. I'm understood, So yeah. The speaking solo is what is happening in the week. You really don't need to be in a country anymore. It's great if you can be, but it doesn't mean that you will learn the language and you will learn it well, because it still requires intention. And there is this kind of myth that you're just going to go, you're going to be immersed, and ta-da, you're going to start speaking. But if you don't actively, because equally, if it's easy for me to create, let's say Turkish, if it's easy for me to create Turkish immersion here at home in the UK, then it's easy for me to create English language immersion when I'm in Turkey, right? And to not socialize and to not go out and to not watch Turkish things or listen to Turkish music. It's just as easy in both directions. So it's not as significant of a step as it used to be. It's still a great thing to do, don't get me wrong. And I know that you were in London for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. And I've, been in Latin America for sort of months on end, and it's been hugely helpful and beneficial to me. But yeah, it's just, it's something that I feel quite strongly about, because it's not something that I've ever majorly experienced intentionally. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of what I've done has been from home and learning from home, and then practicing online or practicing with people, and then going and sort of experiencing it firsthand. So yeah, it's definitely possible to do it that way.
It doesn't matter where you are. I mean, you can learn anywhere. And you say that you don't teach languages, but you teach how to learn a language.
Yeah.
So tell us more about what you do.
So it's, you've probably had this before, right? Where you've tried a new resource, you've come across a new method or technique online, and you've gone, oh, this is it. This is the bit that's missing. And you give it a go, and it doesn't work. It doesn't change anything. And then you feel so deflated. One of two things happen. You either blame yourself or you blame the resource. And either way, you still end up, oh, sorry, balloons, when I do this. Either way, whichever you blame, you still end up trying again with another resource that promises you the same thing, that promises that you're going to get to fluency, etc., etc. Really, it doesn't matter what you're using to learn a language, which resource, however many resources, whatever. That is less important than you knowing what to do with the resources that you have available and what you're using. And that's what I teach. That's what I do. So I can help you become fluent in any language, right? I can give you the tools so that you know how to do that. And then you can go forward and learn any language you like on demand, because you know how to learn a language. And when you know that, and not just, by the way, how to learn a language, the Lindsay method, TM, registered trademark, but actually how to learn a language for you in the best way for you. Because actually putting yourself center to that whole experience is going to be so key to the choices that you make and what you do choose to do with the resources that you have available to you and how you do choose to use them. So I see it really as the first step that actually gives you the freedom to choose then, you know, what you're going to learn, and you then know how you're going to do it.
That's great, because I think this is what we need now. I don't think we need teachers who tell students how to not how to what this piece of grammar means, how to write an email. Okay, that's okay, useful, but what we really need is to make people independent, right? You want to give them the tools, and this is something that education, in my opinion, should do more. Because one of the modules that I did in my master's degree was about learner autonomy. And because students will never stay with you for the rest of their lives, you need, I mean, it's fundamental that you give them the tools to then, okay, go out and know how to learn, instead of making them learn in class and that's it. So what you do is great. And having studied so many languages, I think you're very qualified and experienced to help people with that.
Thank you. And what you say, like the lesson examples you gave, right? How to write an email, what this grammar means and stuff. Let's say that that's taught to a class of 30 students. There'll be a small number of those students. That is the ding, that is the light bulb moment. That is the thing that they have been waiting for, and it's going to really speak to them. But there'll be a lot in that class that are like, okay, yeah, what's next? This isn't relevant to me. When am I going to write an email? That's not part of my plan here, you know? And so when you actually have that learner autonomy, like you're saying, and you're able to know for yourself confidently, be your own teacher, so to speak, then you can decide which lessons you can cherry pick the valuable stuff to you, and you can leave the rest until later if you need to even do it at all, you know? So yeah, it's really about giving yourself the permission to be in charge, right? Even if it's not a teacher, sometimes we leave it up to the book. We think, okay, this book from chapter 1 is going to give me everything I need in the perfect order. I just need to merely follow it, and I shall learn, and I shall emerge as a fluent little butterfly. No, no, not necessarily. So, you know, but when actually you have that book, there's probably a lot of valuable information in there, but it's just information. It's just knowledge. You then need to take it and transfer it and make it into a useful skill for yourself. So that's the step, you know, knowing what to do and knowing how to do that bit.
And you mentioned writing sentences in your Turkish, before your Turkish classes. So let's talk a bit more about writing. Are you fluent? Are you a fluent writer in any language? No, you wouldn't say so.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. So how do you ever use writing to help you learn?
No. Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to say, do you ever use writing like in your life? No.
Okay.
Like in regular life, I don't really, I write for myself. Like I have a little sort of diary, you know, or I write on post-it notes, or I write a text message, an email in English. But that's kind of the extent of my writing, right? In English. Therefore, if I'm thinking about other languages and you said, you know, am I fluent in them? Maybe I answered a bit quickly. Like, I think I get what you mean now. Like there are some, yeah, where I'm not using a dictionary. Is that what you mean? Where I'm just able to.
Yeah, I was wondering if you use writing to practice and improve any language that you're learning, like Russian, Turkish.
Right. All the time.
All the time.
There's with all of the 4 sort of core skill areas, right? So repeat after me: speaking, listening, reading, writing. We know what they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
But each of them can be either a skill that we are aiming to acquire in the language, or it can be a tool that we are using in the process to acquire that language, to acquire that skill, right?
Yeah.
And so the distinction is that, and that's why I answered so quickly, like, no, because I don't do the end product very often. I could in a couple of languages if I wanted to, but it's not something that I do instinctively in my life in general, in English either, right? But in terms of the process, writing is such a useful tool because there are two types of language production. There's writing and there's speaking on a very simple level, right? Speaking is temporary. We say the words,
Gone.
like dust in the air, they're gone,
Mm-hmm.
unless we're recording a podcast. If we're writing, it's temporary and it's instant. So I'm speaking and I'm thinking and I'm saying it pretty much as soon as I
it's
get to
an
think what I'm gonna
online
say.
activity. Yeah.
It's very, very quick, right? Whereas writing is permanent in comparison to speaking being temporary. You know, if we put something down in ink, it's there. And instead of it being instant, it actually has the other quality of it being something that has the potential to be less instant and thought about and slower. So if you struggle with speaking, right, you're probably not going to struggle with it because it's temporary, because that's like, hello, thank goodness I said it. I got the word out. Oh, phew, I'm done. It's there now. No one will remember how badly I pronounced it. But you probably struggle with the instantness of writing, of speaking, right? How it is said and it's like boom, 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 right? That's the bit that people struggle with. Writing as a tool in the process can help you get better at speaking because it gives you the time to sort of percolate on and think about what it is that you want to say. So when you're thinking about speaking, yeah, sure, you can speak and you can practice from the beginning as much as you want. But if you struggle with that, if you want to actually get better at that, you can use writing as a tool to do so, because you can be writing things that you want to say. You're thinking on it. You're really kind of having a chance to put something together that feels better than you could just say in the instant moment. And then you can say it. Then you can speak it. And you can practice that speaking, and hopefully it will be something that then sticks with you. If there's a new phrase that you've learned, you can maybe use it next time in the instant moment of speaking, right? So writing becomes this really valuable tool to kind of give us a bridge to speaking better. Equally, it's a very helpful way of processing ideas. So just this week, I've come back and I'm like, okay, Turkish, I love you and I will not forget you and we will meet again. And I've had a little browse in my book, a little tinkle on the apps of Turkish, but I've gone back into Russian, right? And I'm like, let's fine tune now. Let's look at these cases. Let's really try and understand. Whereas before it's been like, okay, cases, yeah, I see you, but I want to speak, I want to communicate. And now that I'm at that point where I want to fine tune my speaking and actually get better at the little fiddly bits, the little case endings and things, writing is the thing I've been doing all week, where I've got the table of the case endings. I'm then seeing the examples. I'm seeing the words I want to put into a text. I'm thinking and I'm writing, you know. But equally, this is the beauty of writing, is that it can be this tool that gives you space and time to think, but it can be something that you challenge yourself with. So if you feel like, okay, yeah, I see, I actually do that. I do write as a tool. And I do, if I'm thinking, you know, put it down, you can use it in another way. And that is to sort of challenge yourself to see, you know, set a timer. How much can you write? Give yourself a prompt. Find a prompt online. Use ChatGPT, whatever, to find a language prompt to then create something in a set time limit. So each time that you write, you can be using it in a different way. You can be using it as a timed challenge where you're going for quantity. You can be using it as a means of practice. You can be using it as a means of, really thinking about like, okay, I want to write in 10 minutes, but I am going to allow myself to use a dictionary. So you get to make the rules, and each rule that you set and don't set has its, advantages and disadvantages and how it's going to help you. So it's quite a wonderful, I would say, underrated skill and tool in our language learning, because we think so often we're waiting for the information to come to us. We're waiting for the resource so that we can take it in. But this is something we can do for ourselves anytime with very little input or resource needed.
Yeah. And also, you don't know whether you're doing the right thing or not. I mean, it could be if you're a student or if you're someone who wants to learn a new thing, not necessarily a language, web development, for example, and you want to self-teach yourself, self-teach. You want to be you want to learn by yourself, basically. I guess that people would feel, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right thing? Is this the right method? Should I do that instead of this? So probably this is something that I've experienced when I'm learning a new skill. And that's when, you start asking yourself, should I hire a teacher? Should I hire a tutor? So what would you say? Because you study by yourself, basically. You don't have, I don't think that you take Russian, Turkish, and many classes over the year, or do you? I don't know.
I wouldn't describe them as classes. I sometimes work with tutors, like on italki, when there's a community tutor and a professional tutor. I tend to opt for the community tutors because I don't really need the professional tutor who is going to give me a sort of formal lesson structure and teach me the grammar and all of that bit I can do on my own. What I need a human for, and I say human because it could be a community tutor, a conversation class, it could be a study buddy, it could be an exchange partner. It could be someone in your life that you know or you love or is speaking the language, right? Whatever that looks like, that the human for me is the speaking practice and the listening practice too. But in terms of what you would normally get from a class, like the expectation from that of like, here is the information, here is the vocab list, here is the grammar, that I can get.
Yeah, you can look it up. Yeah.
And when so when you know how to learn a language for yourself and you have that knowledge, you don't need to worry about like hiring a tutor or a teacher unless you want to, unless then becomes an option.
Yeah. Let's say I want to learn I want to learn French. Okay. I have zero French. And I come to you. What would we do together? How would you teach me how to learn?
Yeah. Well, the way that I work with people now, at least, is within my program, which is Language Life, right? So let's say that you join Language Life, you have within that, the three kind of elements of it are that you've got the self-study curriculum, which is the learning how to learn stuff that's there for you. Then you have the regular practice, because it's not just about, hey, have some information. Like you need a chance to use what you're learning. And then there's the human support, the feedback, which is direct from me and with me. So at the end of each module in the curriculum, we have a one-on-one check-in. When you complete milestones in the program, we have one-on-one check-in. So we have these moments throughout where we're able to connect and go back and forth a little bit and make sure that you feel okay with everything. There's nothing misunderstood. You're on the right path. So the curriculum begins, the program begins with you and, again, with the sort of back and forth and the input from me to decide your roadmap throughout the program. So are you going to go through the 12 modules in order? Which is, I should say, I have designed them in a logical order that works and makes sense. But equally, I know that sometimes people come in and they're like, it's vocab. That's my start point. That's right. So I'm like, okay, skip to module 5. It's all good. Like there's no obligation. So we want to make sure that, with that roadmap, you've got a bit of alignment with your needs and your wants, and that everything is in an order that's going to function for you. As you go through the curriculum, like I say, we've then got those chances really regularly to be checking in. And so what that's about is making sure that you've understood everything first and foremost, and there's nothing that's like, what does this mean? You've understood everything in the module, and any follow-up questions you've got a chance to ask. And when there's stuff that you then want to actually apply, right? Because it's like I say, it's all well and good just having information and getting knowledge, but you want to apply it to make it a skill that you have. When it comes to applying, that's when we then begin to work together to make sure that you're applying it in ways that will work for you. So when you're beginning, if you're right at the very, very beginning of everything, like, I know I want to learn French, but I don't know where to begin. I would say first and foremost, okay, why do you want to learn French?
Because I like the way it sounds.
Okay. Why do you like the way it sounds?
Because it's why do I like the way it sounds? Because I would like to speak like they speak, and it's charming. I don't know. It's a romantic language to speak.
Okay, so there's something that has kind of captured you. It
Yeah.
sounds like about French, right? So that's your starter. Why? That's your spark for the whole thing. As you go along, I'm pretty sure you're going to find more to add to that spark. It's kind of, if you think of like it's a little spark of a fire, you're going to find new wood and kindling to add to that to really make it grow and stay lit, and stay bright. Okay, so the first thing, we've established a bit about why. What does that look like then? Is it a case, what is it that you want? Is it that you want to be fluent in French? Is it that you want to be able to speak when you go to Paris in a few months' time? Is it that you want to move there? Is it that you are married to someone? What's the kind of end goal that ties in with your why?
Yeah, this would be, I don't have any practical goals to learn French because I'm not planning to move to Paris. I'm not planning to, I don't have French friends that don't speak English, so I can speak English to them. It would be just something out of pleasure, just learning a new language that won't serve any purpose really, because I'm not going to need it. But I think it will be fun to learn, and then it will be fun to speak it too.
I feel we have just found a purpose. It's going to be fun and it's going to be pleasure.
Yeah.
Right. And that is often very underrated. We think that the things we do need to have some huge, impactful
capitalism. That's the
essentially, if we break it right down, it is, right? But pleasure is underrated. And so sometimes, when you start and you're thinking like, oh, what is my reason? What am I doing? Oh, I don't have a reason to learn. Oh, if it is just pleasure, that is a huge reason. Prioritize that. Prioritize pleasure, because you're going to be wanting to, have those links back to remember when it comes to rekindling the motivation as you go, right? Okay, so we've got a bit of stuff to work with here. Is it that you want a sort of round grasp of the language? Is it that you want that grasp to be more the written language or the spoken language? What's the emphasis that you're going for?
Spoken and listening. I learn a lot by listening. I learned English by listening mainly.
Excellent. Okay, that's good.
So
that's good information.
The songs, the French songs,
I
like them. So I don't need to write in French, also because I know it might be a nightmare because they've got all the spelling doesn't match the pronunciation.
Almost as fun to spell as English, huh?
Yeah. Even worse, right? It's worse than English. Would you agree?
I could say
I mean,
I won't.
AUX is O.
I'm not going to start a I'm not going to start a war.
Okay, okay.
But
We do
yeah,
need
it's
another one.
but there we go. So we've now got your focus. We understand why, and when you and these might sound like sort of trivial questions, but really as you're going through these processes, even if there's no like sort of solid, clear goal, you don't always need a goal in a language. Sometimes it's just useful to reflect on this stuff to then have a clearer picture as to where you want to be going, regardless of if the goal is set in stone or there's any goal at all. And so from there, I would say, okay, so we know that your focus is more the oral language. That means that the resources that you're going to use are going to be primarily based in that medium, especially if you said you've mostly learned English by listening. We're going to want to focus in on some audio resources for you in particular. Like I say, this is going to be different for everyone, right? But also, I think it is always foolish to ignore completely the other side of a language. If if your focus is the written, it's foolish to completely ignore the spoken. If your focus is the spoken, you shouldn't completely ignore the written. So there'll be moments where you'll have, maybe you're listening to something and you're reading a transcript, or, I would say, okay, I'd love for you to mix in some French language accounts to your social media so that you're seeing bits of it connected in often cases there, to like a video with audio to see the text at the same time, right? Or you're watching a film and listening, but with French subtitles to see, oh, yeah, I'm kind of following along. So all of these different things, these recommendations that are going to be different for everyone.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that
know?
you don't prescribe a method. Here is my
Mm-mm.
method. This is the best way to learn. Really like that.
No, there is no best way to learn. Everything is valid.
Mm.
Everything is valid. Like, I have met people who have learned languages from, watching Friends, or from watching The Simpsons, or from having hours and hours in a classroom, or from going to a country and just immersing themselves in, like, it's all good.
Yeah,
It all works.
yeah. But so, what do you think of these people? Because I talked on your podcast about my book,
Mm.
and basically in the first paragraph in the introduction, I say people keep saying that there's a best way to learn a language. This is the best method, and this book is to rebel against that. So, what do you think of those marketers who say, "All right, we've got the best method. It's here. Come and get it. We don't know who you are, but we've got the best method." And this applies to not like language, not only language learning, because there are many things like best method to lose weight.
Lose weight, diet, yeah, the
Yeah. So,
obvious angles. Yeah.
uh, I mean, what's your? I mean, don't you get angry when you see these things, or don't you get upset, or I don't know.
I don't get angry at a lot of things.
Mm,
Um, this included. I say angry is probably too strong a word. And
yeah.
I don't blame people
Mm,
for promoting, products or language courses or whatever in that way, because it's kind of a problem that's looking itself in the mirror, where people think that they want to learn a language quickly and therefore they need the best method, and there must be one best way to do it because everything else they've tried hasn't worked, so there must be something just around the corner, which is quite a beautiful sense of optimism collectively as humankind. So I'm glad that that exists, right? But equally then what that means is all that people are doing when they say this is the best ever method, TM, register, trademark, copyright, like all that is a response to what people think they need and want. So
mm,
it's a very simplistic trade-off of, giving the people what they want. But I feel that the best stuff in this world really happens when actually we question that, and when we can effectively communicate how and why we're questioning that. And that's kind of what I try to do, because there's room for disruption. We need that disruption to to really encourage people, especially, you know, in English speaking countries, I feel, to feel that language learning is something they are capable of, because for so long it has been gatekept as, you know, even I would say in this country now, like there's probably still private schools and boarding schools that teach Latin and Greek. You're not going to find that in a state school. Like you'd be hard pushed, right? You might, but you'd be hard pushed. And so there is this kind of hierarchy still and gatekeeping still around languages that still takes place. That really, that's what I would say angers me, is that it's not something that is yet seen as accessible and possible for everyone. Because the other side of that is that it ignores, like I said at the beginning, like it ignores the other side of polyglottism, which is people that live in multilingual environments and speak multiple languages without even knowing what the word polyglot means. It's just part of their day job. You know, when I was in Turkey, the people that work in tourism, right, in hotels, in restaurants, some of the best polyglots in the world. They're not fluent, but they don't need to be fluent. They just need to know how to say hello, how are you, what would you like, thank you, just the basics to encourage people from different nationalities to eat in their restaurant. Oh, like he said something in my language. Yeah. That's cool. Let's go there.
Yeah.
And they're so good at it. I saw one guy who assumed, and this is the bit that's maybe more questionable, assumed that a couple walking by were Indonesian. This Turkish restaurant guy then is speaking Indonesian. I'm like, whoa, he's speaking Indonesian. How did, you know, I'm impressed. Like, because I wasn't expecting that. So I can't imagine how they felt. So there is this just wealth of people around the world from all walks of life that are already multilingual. And it's about time that we realized collectively that we are all capable of that. And that's the bit that kind of riles me up, you know?
Nice. I sometimes say that I'm a polyglot too, because I speak Italian, English, American, Canadian, Australian, South African. That's okay, that's a stupid joke. And okay, let's one more thing about writing I wanted to ask you. Because in one of your podcast episodes, you said that a skill that's worth having is learning how to self-assess your writing. And because I'm doing a master's degree, I'm writing a dissertation, and I'm focusing that dissertation on helping non-native English writers self-assess. So what do you have to say about self-assessing your writing?
That's a great question. I would say that, first of all, has to be said, there's nothing wrong with having someone else assess, right? Having someone else check. But that's not always possible. It's not available to all of us. When I mentioned earlier, I've been doing lots of writing this week in Russian and in general, like in Turkish. What that process tends to look like is me attempting something, kind of checking it with, and this will sound really trivial, but it should not be underrated, checking it with Google Translate for a very quick assessment, because I know the structure of a language enough to know when it's giving me a dodgy response, which I have to say is happening less and less than it used to, which is good. So using a tool like Google Translate or like a dictionary tool like Word Reference to then sort of fill in the blanks or check the bits that I've got stuck on. And then also to have the trust in yourself to be able to read back something that you've written, to be able to actually look at it in full with impartial, non-judgmental eyes and not think, oh my God, I've made so many mistakes, I'm so terrible. And if you do struggle with that, one thing I recommend, and maybe I said it in that same episode, is this idea of mistake goals, where often the people that struggle with that feeling of like, oh no, a mistake I've done, tend to be quite perfectionist and tend to be quite attracted to the idea of goal setting, right? And that is quite connected to them. So what I say is, if you struggle with that and you're like, oh, this is bad, I've made a mistake, set yourself a mistake goal, because then you will actively be looking for your mistakes in your writing. You'll be wanting to find them so that you reach your goal. So let's say that you write a paragraph and you're relatively happy. You've done a quick sort of scan over and check, but now you're like, okay, I want to make this even better. Set some mistake goals and say, okay, I want to find 5 mistakes in this paragraph. There might be one, there might be none, but there might be 50, right? But if you aim for, let's say, something like 5 is good, then you're actively zoomed in to find them, rather than just looking over thinking, yep, it's good, it's fine, which is the easy option. With that, if you've got that mistake goal, if it becomes the thing that you fear becomes something that you're aiming for, it really, really shifts the perspective on it. And it's a huge part of self-assessment and getting comfortable with that. So that would be the biggest piece of advice that I can share in terms of self-assessment and finding a comfort in it.
And now we've got ChatGPT. Recently, I've created this collection of prompts that you can ask ChatGPT or any other AI chatbot to edit, to ask questions about grammar, about vocabulary, about punctuation. It's a free tool, and I think there's never been a better time than now to improve your writing, because you've got free tools like it's a language tool. So you mentioned word reference, Google Translate.
Yep.
Those are useful too. Yeah.
Add that in. Yeah.
So, all right.
And much like the developments we've seen with stuff like Google Translate, ChatGPT, and all of that stuff with AI is only going to become more and more sort of fine-tuned and accurate, which can be a good thing.
And they can talk.
They
can also talk now. Like ChatGPT 4, they can talk. So you can have a conversation with the machine. So you say, okay, how are you today? And they respond in the language that you want. So it's
actually, that gives me another idea for something to recommend on that point. Speaking of talking, this week I was contacted out of the blue by a French newspaper about language learning, and I was like, okay, and it was all in French. I'm like, okay, it's fine, whatever. And then they sent me the questions, and like you said, are you fluent in writing? And I just sat there like, this is so much easier speaking. I could sit and I could type and so I opened the Google Doc, I had the questions, and I just pressed the voice type button and set it to French and just spoke what I wanted to say, spoke my answer, and then went in and self-assessed and fine-tuned it and edited it all. So that's another really useful tool, is to use something like voice typing to give you a foundation for your writing to then tweak and edit.
Yeah, I'm wondering if teachers and language schools will eventually disappear. I mean, teachers in the traditional sense of teacher, because if you can do, I think I heard it on a podcast, not a language learning podcast, but there was someone who was saying, if you can look it up, well, then we don't need you anymore, because I can look it up. So I don't need more knowledge. I need something else. I need maybe a community. Maybe I need connections. I need,
if it did disappear, the idea of teachers and language lessons, it would be replaced by something that is filling the gap of the bit that you're missing, which I think would be the community, would be the humanness to the whole thing. Kind of like we had with lockdown, right? Where after years of in and out of lockdown all over the place, who knows what it was like in every other country. I barely remember what it was like here, but after that time, then it was like, I want to go outside, and like, concert ticket sales are like through the roof, because it's the human connection is the bit that we've been missing. We can have sort of calls like this where we're speaking digitally with one another, and we've got that type of connection, but it isn't quite the same as being in a room. So I think if that were to happen, there would be something that fills the gap, something that replaces it in terms of the human element.
I read it in a book that language is also in the body. Like language is not just in the mind. So the kind of interaction that we are having now, as you said, it will be completely different than the kind of interactions that we might have if we meet for coffee. Also because language is in the world. So even moving our hands when we talk, it's embodied. So and we can't, I mean, you're a bidimensional picture now there moving for me. You're not a person right now, okay? What I'm seeing.
And I'm holding back on my hands because I don't want to hit the desk and make a noise. And so I'm kind of restricting.
Yeah, see where I've got my arms? The same.
Yeah, exactly.
So okay. Yeah. No, you wanted to say something else?
That was it. Just I think it will change, but not fully disappear. Yeah.
Okay.
It's an interesting question.
So plans for the future. You've got something new coming up soon. Yeah. You want to tell us more about this?
Yeah. The 1st to the 8th of December, head on over to my website, which is lindsaydoeslanguages.com, because it's actually the second time I'm hosting this. The first time was in 2021, didn't happen last year, and I was like, I want to bring it back, so I'm bringing it back this year. It's called the Language Learner Goodie Bag, and there are over 20 contributions from language companies, big and small, that are free or discounted for you to enjoy for free. So you sign up to the Goodie Bag for free and you get access to all of these offers. There's so much good stuff in there.
Courses
to go. So there's courses, there's ebooks, there's subscriptions, there's like app subscriptions, there are trial lessons, there's in fact, I can say with confidence there are over 150 languages just from the 23 contributors. That's because one contributor offers over 150 languages, but there are some language specific options in there. There are lots on the how-to of language learning, a good mixed bag. That's hence why it's a goodie bag.
Wow.
So lots to discover.
Can my book be there too?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll talk about. Okay, Lindsay. So your website, YouTube channel, with more than 40,000 subscribers.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big one. Yeah. And your website, lindsaydoeslanguages.com. It's going to be in the show notes as well. Thank you. It's been really interesting. Really interesting. Yeah. And I really admire you, because I can imagine your brain would be, if we could see your brain, I think it would be very different from a person who's maybe only bilingual. Because let's show us your brain. Show us your brain.
I know. I'm curious too. I want to see the differences. Yeah. Who knows? Huh?
Okay. Thank you, Lindsay. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Fabio.